don't see that, I think my hotspot's working if you don't see the Marriott.
Does it say Marriott?
Yes, in bar 2015.
Thank you so much. Yeah, journalists are a little itchy when we can't figure out how to
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Good morning and welcome to the State Bar of Georgia annual meeting and the first CLE to kick it off. Thank you so much. And my name's Doug Ashworth. I'm with ICLE of Georgia. I've got just a couple of minutes of housekeeping announcements and then I'll turn it over to one of our program co-chairs. Today's program is approved for 3 total CLE hours. If you want the professionalism hour, there is a self-report form in front of you. If you are a speaker, don't worry about it. We take care of it. If you're a speaker, don't worry about it. We take care of it. But if you're not a speaker, you're an attendee. If you want the 1-hour professionalism, use the self-report form. If you have any questions, just ask me about it. If you are a speaker, your CLE is automatic, and we thank you for volunteering your time to be here. If you are not a speaker and you want CLE credit, I need one of these little blue cards from you. If you have any questions, just see me at the back. You get it at the registration desk down the hallway. So if you're not a speaker and you want CLE credit, I need this little card from you. It should be in your name badge that you got at the State Bar registration desk. I'll be here throughout the morning if you have any questions. Everything that you see today was put together under the leadership of Mike Monahan and Alvarita Hanson. And I'm sure if you're here, you know that Mike is the director of the State Bar Bono project. Alvarita is the executive director of the Commission on Professionalism, Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism in Georgia. We're both dear friends, and we appreciate all that both of you do for ICLE. And I know you'll enjoy the program. Would you join me in welcoming and thanking Mike Monahan and Alvarita Hanson?
I'm over here.
Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm trying something new, so I don't want to touch that because this is is my new Surface Pro, so I'm used to paper. Well, this year, our own Chief Justice Hugh Thompson, who is right there, okay, you all know my boss, focused the bar's and public's attention on our duty to ensure access to justice. He emphasized in his State of the Judiciary address several access to justice issues. The importance of available lawyers for all persons was number one. But he also talked about the importance of a diverse judiciary as Georgia grows in population and diversity, affordable legal services, and provision of legal services to those who cannot afford a lawyer, available of legal services in both urban and rural Georgia, the challenges presented to the courts, seeing an increase in pro se litigants, the fact that those who do not speak English are entitled to justice, and the provision of interpreters is a court challenge, and the catch-all last, fairness in sentencing, expanded technology, and financial support for judges and courts as access to justice issues. In the same vein, our bar president this year, Patrice Perkins Hooker, emphasized our duty to ensure that justice is accessible to all. She advocated for a program to place attorneys in all underrepresented counties, particularly the 6 in which there was no lawyer at the time, and another program to train a cadre of new attorneys who would represent not just poor, but low-income clients. She not only talks the talk, she walks the walk, and is a true exemplar of an attorney dedicated to ensuring access to justice. At the mid-year meeting of the State Bar of Georgia this January, we were asked to present a CLE on pro bono opportunities. And we presented a roundtable that not just provided information, but was a lively, positive, and energetic discussion. So when we were asked to put together another seminar on pro bono work at this annual meeting, we thought that we could make this another lively, energetic, and informative program. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to and welcome you to what we have planned as a unique CLE program. I hope that some people can get to beautiful Stone Mountain and enjoy this program that we planned, because we have a stellar program. Now, Mike Monahan and I share a common professional past. 3 decades ago, I had his job as the pro bono director for the State Bar of Georgia and Georgia Legal Services. And as I was sharing with some of the folks coming in today, many of us are former legal aid lawyers. Some are still with legal aid. But legal aid lawyers who do good have a huge commitment to excellence and end up doing a lot of really important and fun things during their careers. In the ancient world, the Greeks believed that all great insights came from one of 9 muses, divine sisters who brought inspiration to mere mortals. In the modern world, few people still believe in the muses, but we all still love to hear stories of sudden inspiration. While research has not exactly validated the existence of the divine muses, it has provided some insight into how eureka moments happen and how to make them happen more often. Eureka moments feel like flashes of insight because they often come out of a period when the mind is not focused on the problem. What psychologists call a period of incubation, a stage when people briefly step back from their work. It is then that the mind can look back with introspection and evaluate the validity and importance of the work one has done. We believe that our first panel of storytellers that we've assembled today have had their eureka moments from their pro bono work, and that they, having been inspired to do good and greater things, can inspire all of us today to do good and greater things. This program today has 3 parts. First, we're going to call upon our storytellers, who are the men and women up front. an impressive array of attorneys who have in the course of their practices engaged in pro bono work. We've asked them to answer 3 simple questions in less than 10 minutes each. First, how did you become involved in pro bono work? Second, what kind of pro bono work do you do? And 3, what does your pro bono work mean to you? The second part of our program, which I'm going to turn over to Mike Monahan, involves our judges, who will tell us what the court and judges can do to support the pro bono work of the attorneys who come before them. And the third and final part of today's program will bring forward a strong group of leaders of organizations that engage pro bono attorneys in the work that they do. And they will talk about the nuts and bolts of attorney involvement, cases control, time commitment, subject matter, and the like. We encourage everybody here to share their ideas today, with those present and not present, and to ask questions of this talented group of lawyers that we've invited. So without further ado, let me acknowledge our participants in the first part of our program. You will notice that they have diverse pro bono experience, from civil to criminal practices, to raising money, because money is important, to raising awareness, to raising sand. So you can read more about them in your materials. We spent a lot of time giving you their impressive bios. We're going to just go down the line. We're going to start in the order that that's easy, right? And some of them have brought some audio-visual materials to share with us, and we've just asked them to answer those questions and to give us their eureka moments. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome Gail Baylor, Lawrence Bracken, Mallory Davis, David Elmore, Jay Fox, Philip Holliday, Shalom Parham, Michelle West, and David Elmore. Did I get everybody? Amen. So Ms. Baylor hails from Stone Mountain, and she's going to start off for us. So when you start, just introduce yourself, and let's go. Thank you.
Okay. I am Gail Baylor, and my office is located right here in beautiful Stone Mountain, Georgia. And I love it. I'm about 5 minutes from the park, and I get to walk over here every other day. So I enjoy that. So I will tell my eureka moment, and hopefully that will answer those 3 questions as I tell you what happened. During the month of October 2014, I had an opportunity to complete an adoption for the Georgia Legal Services Program on a pro bono basis. I met in 2013 a stepmother who was seeking to adopt her 10-year-old stepson, whose biological mother had died. He was a special needs child, and this was an African-American family that had relocated here from Louisiana after Hurricane Katrina. Well, after working on this pro bono adoption for quite some time because of the circumstances involved financially, it took a while. The day finally arrived to get that final adoption decree signed. And I can tell you that, I confess that I was somewhat relieved, because I was just ready to move on to something that was more income producing. I tell you now that I was wrong. After arriving at the courthouse in Rockdale County Superior Court, I checked in with the judge, and the family began to trickle in. Well, we had the grandmother, the mother of the stepmother, a cousin and her daughter, 2 teenagers that were dressed kind of hip, and they came in, a boy and a girl who belonged to the stepmother, the stepmom, of course, and the dad. And so I said, well, where is the little guy? And they said, there he is right there. And so I looked over and I saw this little boy, and he was wearing black creased pants, shiny black shoes, a lavender shirt, a lavender and black tie, and he was wearing black rimmed glasses. And I said, you're so cute. I just wanted to hug him right there, but I didn't. So we proceeded to the judge's chambers, and I noticed that he was carrying a folder with the New Orleans Saints helmet on it. what's in that folder? And his stepmother replied, he has something that he wants to read to the judge. And I said, okay. So we went into the judge's chambers, and the judge had donned his black robe, and he was ready. The secretary said, come on back. So we went to the back office, and the judge saw that folder also. And he said, he teased the little boy a little bit, and he was talking with him. He said, do you like the Atlanta Falcons? And the little boy quickly and emphatically said, no! And we all just laughed. And I said, Your Honor, he has something that he would like to read to you from that folder. And the judge said, okay. So the little boy took this piece of notebook paper out of his folder, and he said, Dear Judge, I would like to thank you for my adoption. My mom takes care of me. She taught me how to write neatly, how to spell my name and my ABCs. I would like to thank her for being my mom. I love you, Mom. And he looked up at his stepmother, with these eyes that were full of love and this adorable, priceless smile. It just came out. I said, oh, how sweet. And our hearts melted, mine, the judge, everyone that was sitting in the room that day. Well, the judge chatted with him a little bit more, and then after the formalities of the adoption, the judge signed the adoption decree and made the adoption final. And then he presented the little boy with his gift bag that contained a teddy bear and some pencils and some paraphernalia items just to memorialize that day and his trip to the courthouse. We began to take pictures, and the judge was in a few pictures. I was in a few pictures with them. We were taking pictures. A lot of commotion was going on, a lot of hugging going on. By that time, it was after 9 o'clock. But then I noticed that the stepmother was standing still. And she was looking at me with tears in her eyes. And so I reached up to hug her, because she was quite a bit taller than me. And the secretary said, those are tears of happiness. And the judge said, oh, it's all right to cry. Those are tears of happiness. And the tears flowed, and the occasion was so beautiful. Well, by that time, after that, the judge and the grandmother struck up this conversation about Louisiana cuisine and some restaurants and what have you. I was kind of listening in. But I was mindful of the fact that the judge needed to get on that bench because it was after 9 o'clock, the courtroom was crowded. So I said something to that effect. And he looked at me and he looked towards the courtroom and he said, let them wait. And he continued with his conversation with the grandmother. So when they started talking about red beans and rice, I headed for the door with a smile on my face. And there were attorneys sitting out in my outer office, and when I came out smiling, they were looking at me smiling, because they had kind of heard the whole thing. Well, on the way to the car, I was walking out with the family. I was starting feeling pretty good about myself, about what I had done. My father was a preacher in North Carolina, so I said, I've been a blessing to these people today. I have been a blessing. But when I got in my car and began to drive away from the courthouse, I was still feeling something. I was feeling good. I was feeling this joy. I was feeling unexpected joy. And I was trying to identify what was happening, why am I feeling this way? But my mind immediately went to this little story that I probably first learned as a little girl growing up in North Carolina, probably from my dad, where in the Bible, it says that they took the little children to Jesus. And they wanted Jesus to touch them. And the disciples rebuked them because they said, Jesus, it's too important to be dealing with children. He doesn't have time for this. And Jesus saw this and he was displeased. And he said, suffer the little children, let them come to me, for such is the kingdom of God. And he took those children in his arms, and he took his time and laid his hands on them and blessed every single one of them. And I felt that that's what was happening to me. I felt that I was being blessed. I felt that the entire much more than what I had actually given. And what I had received was worth more than any amount of silver or gold or any money that I could have been paid for that blessing. So I wanted to thank Georgia Legal Services for that opportunity to serve, and I thank him for that unexpected joy. Thank you.
And I'm supposed to follow that, right? I'm going to try to do a little technology switch here. All right, my favorite. So I'm going to try to do this a different way because I don't know, I'm different sometimes, but I want to just start by answering the questions and then using as an example one particular case. This quote by Tupac, I guess our favorite, is that your favorite rapper, Tim?
I'm a Biggie guy.
Biggie. That's one thing we don't agree on, but it's okay. His quote is, because I remind you the things you were made to forget. I went to law school with the expectation of being able to use my legal degree to help Black and brown and poor people have a voice that I didn't see them have growing up on the south side of Chicago. Even when I would travel from the Naval Academy to Washington, D.C. and see people who look like me disenfranchised, criminalized, and marginalized. And so when I went to law school, the reason I do pro bono work is because I believe that we've been given a tool that we can use to help balance the scales of justice that have been out of balance for many, many years. And so many times when people see me or our firm doing work, it's because we're trying to remind ourselves and our community of the things that we were made to forget. And so with that, we have, this is what motivates my pro bono work. Jason Allard was a young man that I met years ago when he was actually in high school in Rota, Spain. I was stationed in Rota, Spain as a naval officer, and we started a program, a basketball program, a youth development program, and my co-laborer in that work kept it going. And so he would bring a group of young people to Atlanta every year to go to Morehouse, go to Clark, go to Georgia Tech, go to Georgia State, but to expose them to colleges in the Atlanta metro area, take them to the King Center. Jason Allard was one of those young men, and he was in high school, and after he went to Florida State and graduated, he said he wanted to practice law. He came back, and he started volunteering at our office for a couple of days, and the next thing we know, we hired him for about 2 years until he was ready to go to Georgia State, and now he's a practicing attorney. And so my work and my role in our work is to make young men that look like Tupac and young men that look like Jason, for both of their lives to be valued equally, for them to be seen equally in our justice system, in our society. And so that is what motivates our pro bono work, because I see the great work that Jason is capable of. And sometimes I think the possibilities of the young men that I come into contact with through organizations like Let Us Make Man, are overlooked. And so that's what motivates us. And so there was a young man that we had an opportunity.
10-year-old who has been described by police as the getaway driver following a brutal home invasion in Chattahoochee Hills. Nikki Neely was shot twice in the neck. Her 1-year-old son was slammed against a wall back in August.
So this young man's name is Eric Johnson. And some of you already may remember in Chattahoochee Hills, there were 2 men that were captured the night of shooting a young woman by the name of Nikki Neely, and then taking her baby and smashing her baby literally against the wall. And Eric Johnson called the police when he got home and saw it on the news the next day, and he told the police, the Fulton County Police, that I dropped those young men off and about 4 or 5 o'clock. This happened at about 7:30, 8 o'clock. They took the report, they passed it on to Chattahoochee Hills Police Department. Chattahoochee Hills Police contacted them and said they wanted to talk to him. Unfortunately, what we see happen oftentimes when police encounter African American men who at times are in a home without a father, they became aggressive. And so the mother was concerned about how aggressive the law enforcement was with their son when he was volunteering to give information. To make a long story short, the officers decided that they would fix him. They went and took out a warrant to arrest him for the exact same charges for being a party to a crime for what was done to Nikki Neely and her child. And so I had heard about this, and then on a Saturday morning, it's nothing like a mother's plea. A mother came to me, came to my office, and we met. And she said, my son is innocent. And having practiced criminal defense law for over a decade, you can't imagine how many times I've heard that. And it turned out that it was not true. But in this particular instance, I said, well, ma'am, I really can't afford to take on, I told her what it would cost. She said, there's no way I can pay that. I said, well, I really can't afford to take on a case of this magnitude with this kind of, because we knew that they would, throw the book at me for something as heinous as this. So I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I talked to my law partner. I said, I'm just going to go by the jail and just meet with the young man. And those of you all who know my law partner, Robert Bozeman, he is the one who kind of keeps our business running. Because if it was up to me, we would be out of business. We just give all our services away. And so I went over and I met with Eric Johnson in Fulton County Jail. And when I met with him, I met for about an hour and a half, and I realized, and it was a disturbing feeling, and I realized that this was an innocent young man who was plastered all over the news as this rogue and the cold word, thug. And it was just disturbing. And so I went back to my law partner, I called him up, and I said, Rob, this boy is innocent, man. I said, he's innocent. And I want to take this case on. And he said, well, if he's innocent, I guess we have to. And so we had a number of hearings. We started working on Eric's behalf. We were able to secure a bond for him. The bond was $50,000, which none of the other co-defendants did receive any bond. We partnered with the church and community members and asked them to help raise the money. So we were going around from church to church, literally trying to tell his story. And one church in particular, St. Hope United Church of Christ, took it up. And they helped raise the money and work with the bonding, a bail bondsman, and we got him out. Eric spent 100 days in jail, going between Fulton and Hall County, because Fulton was overcrowded. And he was not guilty of anything. But the case wasn't over. So the case kept going. And those of us who litigated, this is our arena, the courthouse. This is where we go to fight for justice and to fight for innocent people and to fight for people's lives. And so we go back and forth, and we have had many battles with District Attorney Paul Howard, and there have been some good ones and some bad ones. But I'm standing here proud to say that Mr. Howard, after some months, made the right decision. And the case it took us a year to get Eric's case dismissed. And Eric lost not only 100 days of his life, but he also lost the opportunity. He had just graduated as an honor student. He was a beta club. He lost the opportunity to go to college. So he had to stay home. It was just a devastating blow to him. But that worked, and this is the day with Attorney Tawana Morgan that we actually came out of the courthouse, and he was given a full exoneration. And I'm thankful that the story didn't end there. We helped Eric, with the help of community members, go to Payne College. And he graduated last year. And so Eric will be with me on Father's Day, because we didn't get a victory. I got a godson in this process. And I hope that those of you all, most of you all that are here, I know many of you are already doing this work, but I hope you would reach out to other people and encourage them to not judge people and to find a way to use their legal talent to help other people. Thank you.
Really? I mean, we've had Jesus and tears.
I didn't cry, almost cried.
Then you got the baby up there.
Mr. Chief Justice, everybody, my name is Damon. I'm a native of Savannah. I live here in Atlanta. I practice with a small firm called Noel Sparks, where I give guidance to small businesses, nonprofits, local governments in the areas of HR and political matters. But I'm on the panel today to talk about my story, which has been my cycling initiative to ride around in all 159 counties in Georgia, raising awareness for the Georgia Legal Services Program. Tupac had a song where he said, "I get around." I get around Jesus. And it's tough. I'm actually almost complete with the initiative. In fact, we've done 157 of the 159 counties, and the update is we'll finish with Union and Towns on Monday, which happens to coincide with, and here's the reason how or why I got involved with the pro bono issue. Because my story is about awareness and advocacy and fundraising, because it ain't that hard, and it's just as important. So I've been a member of the board of directors for the Georgia Legal Services Program, and you all know Georgia Legal Services. You know, we are a statewide law firm providing civil legal services for persons with low incomes, ensuring equal access to justice and creating opportunities out of poverty. We do it in our offices in Gainesville, Athens, in our Cleveland office, in Macon, Columbus, Albany, Savannah, Brunswick, and Western. We do it with our programs that focus on domestic violence. We do it with our programs that focus on disproportionate school discipline. We have a lot of advocacy related to limited English proficiency, teen dating, violence, and the school prison pipeline challenge that we have. Because we see men and areas that I have since learned have poverty rates, some like Native County, 30% range. Some like Telfair County, which are listed in top 10 poorest counties in the U.S. So there are challenges out there. Stories that I hear because my rides, and I'll tell you about the rides. I hear stories from folk. My story, the State Bar was kind enough to sort of recap it early on page 18 in your book, Like the Georgia County Initiative. And then I heard a few stories, including Chattanooga County and Hancock County. We talked about how people there need help. They need help, and people don't think about celebrity services. And so on my rides, and it's coincidental, I try to recap the rides through social media at Bike GA Counties is my Twitter feed, at Damon Elmore, creative name for my Instagram feed. But you'll see pictures always capture the county line signs so I can make sure that people know that I've been there. And the courthouse, because like you said, that's where we take our bike. And it's really at the courthouse. Not to mention, to do it. Because from architecturally, from a historical standpoint, are enjoyable pieces. But I think that cycling, which has been a passion for me, provides an opportunity to get on the road and do things that I drive can't. You can't really get into a county seat and see what's happening. You can't see what the industry may or may not be. You can't see where your economic engines are going. You can't see where your housing isn't available. You can't see those things during your driving, but you can see them on the bike. So what we've done is try and make sure that we tell that story through there. I sort of matched it to the neighbor who was training for the Susan Komen 3-day week, who was walking to raise money for breast cancer awareness. And I thought, I can do that this way. And it's been fun. The goal from a monetary standpoint has been to raise $15,900, which is $1,000 for each county. Very close to our goal, and I still have a week. In fact, if you haven't, the webpage where you can make a donation is, everybody need to get their pens out? Hold on. It's going to be long, but it's razoo, Ramsey-Damon-Bike-in-every-Georgia-county. It's in the book, too. I want to screw that here, right? Or I'll take cash donations. Checks, but all donations go directly to the program. And I use the razoo instead of any other kind of GoFundMe or anything else because I learned that razoo is a term for a coin that has on its face meaningless or insignificant value, but actually it's a lot of money to put together. So here's what I've learned about legal services and access to justice. You all probably know what it's still a great need. Still a big need. Georgia is an amazingly large and diverse state, from the coast to the state parks, and the lakes, the mountains. And so I also would encourage you, I guess my Park Chamber of Commerce advocacy comes out, to explore the state because it's fantastic and it's beautiful too. Putnam County, Baldwin County, those areas. But do keep in mind that there are a lot of people out there who still need help. Here's what's most important. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this too. My term as president of the board of directors for the Georgia Legal Services Program expires next Friday, which is why the edition is also in the next week. And again, you can find out how to make donations right there. But many of you probably, maybe or don't know that the House of Representatives recently submitted a bill for fiscal year 2016 that cuts funding for legal services by 20%. And that's a big deal. And I'm not sure what the Senate may or may not do. I think that would be pretty good. May not do. But that's devastating in many areas, particularly in places like Georgia, where the issues of poverty and population are on the rise. And listen, people think instantly that we help only many homeless people. That's not the case. Many of these people are the friends of our friends, are probably perhaps in administrative capacities in your offices or other places. They're veterans. They're grandparents who are trying to help do adoptions. They're seniors. They're women who need a lot of help because they're in violent situations and there's this conundrum that they have that there's a provider that's there and they don't know what to do. to all of them. But it's very important that if you have not supported your legal aid programs, as a lawyer, you can do it very easily with your bar due statement if it isn't already submitted, and check off that contribution to the legal services program. But just keep that in mind, because I want to thank Professor Harrison for having me on the panel, because that's another way. You can't take a case, which you can, and Mike will tell you how to do that very easily. Take a check to the program and help the men and women who are out there day to day, the Teddys, the Michaels, the Martys, the Phyllises, for sure, the Janice, doing the work that you may not have the time to do, but it's still necessary, it's still very important, especially as lawyers in the state. That's my story, that's my business. Thank you. Jesus, cheers, bike riding, you're on. I don't know what to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Justice. Thank you, Mike and Dean Hanson, and certainly State Bar for inviting me here. I am truly humbled to be invited and to participate with such a great group of panelists here. I'll tell you a little bit about my project and my work, but I truly think it's a small project. I think it does, of course, the benefit. But I don't think I can compete with these guys here. But I'll tell you a story anyway, so you got it. Years ago, before law school, I was fortunate enough to be the beneficiary of some free legal services, and I appreciated that, and I never forgot it. So, going through law school, starting to practice, I've got a solo practice, I always had that in the back of my mind, how much I really appreciated that. And about 3 years ago, I was introduced to the Georgia Senior Legal Hotline, which is part of Atlanta Legal Aid. The manager of the senior hotline at the time came to give a presentation to the elder law section of the Atlanta Bar, and her name is Dean French. Great person, great attorney. And I saw an opportunity from her presentation to give back. So the Georgia Senior Legal Hotline provides limited legal services to seniors throughout the state. Most of it's telephone support, answering questions. Sometimes we'll write a letter, make a phone call on behalf of the senior. If we can't help the senior, if they need more extensive legal services, then we make the connection to other legal services throughout the state if we can. Georgia Legal Services, Volunteer Lawyers Association, Senior Citizens Law Project. There are many organizations that are available to help. So I started volunteer for the senior hotline, and amongst those duties I just described, we at the hotline would send, from seniors that called, we would send a power of attorney form and a healthcare directive, advanced directive for healthcare to seniors that asked for that. And we would provide instructions along with the forms. And we found that there was a significant percentage of the seniors that received these forms, for whatever reason, didn't complete the form. So we started to follow up after the forms went out with a phone call and said, can I answer your questions up with the forms? So that was a follow-up project that was already embedded in the senior hotline. The problem was, if we followed up with these forms, it took away from the other good things that we were trying to do in the hotline. So because we received 12 to 15 requests for these forms and instructions per month, I was looking for a way to get some help with this follow-up project. So as a member and incoming chair of the Atlanta Bar Law section, I suggested that we as a section take on this project on a pro bono basis, and I began to solicit volunteers to help with this follow-up project. So over the years, I've had up to 25 attorneys as part of that project, making phone calls, making follow-up calls, and of course, as many of you know, the reason for the powers of attorney or the healthcare directives is that planning tool is designed to prevent our probate court system from being clogged up by people needing guardianships and conservatorships. So that is basically what I had done, and I was fortunate enough to get support, to get many people willing to help and willing to volunteer. We've helped almost 300 clients over the last couple of years on this project. If you've been practicing law for any time at all, you know that one of the sweetest things in life is calming a troubled soul. And I was the recipient, and I experienced that in my young life, and now I'm able to give that, and I'm sure you are as well, and I'm able to get help to provide more and more people to get that feeling as well. So calming that troubled soul, it's a great thing, and try giving it away. It's even sweeter. Thank you.
So I'm next. I'm Larry Bracken, and I represent Georgia prison inmates and their families in prisoner rights litigation. And to answer our first question, I became involved in pro bono work about 30 years ago when I joined my law firm. And to be candid, it wasn't an option. Our law firm is not an option. You do pro bono work. That's part of what we do, and it's part of our firm's DNA. And I was fine with that. I didn't have, like every other young lawyer, I wanted to do what I could, do what I was told in some instances, and I wanted to get training. I wanted to get into court. I wanted to meet clients. I wanted to probably do things that were a little bit over my head. So I represented clients in criminal cases and housing cases and family law cases, and I assisted in death penalty appeals. And in one instance, very early in my career, watched a client executed by the state of Virginia. And one of the hardest things to this day that I've ever gone through. But 12 years ago, my first watershed moment in the practice I have now, Judge Frank Hull, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, contacted us and told us that she wanted us to take on certain cases involving inmates in the Georgia prisons who were physically disabled. And the judge appropriately did not tell us what bothered her about those cases, but it was evident when we looked at the cases and looked at the record what the problem was. We had a series of disabled inmates who were not being given even minimal accommodations for their time in prison. They wouldn't be moved to the toilet in time. They weren't being moved from their wheelchair to their beds. They weren't able to get to parts of the prison, including the law library, because there was no accommodation for that. And as a result, my team, I have generally 5 to 6 younger lawyers who work with me at any given time, all of whom work on these cases. We went out to different Georgia prisons and with attorneys from the AG's office, checked out the various accommodations. Our firm gave us money to hire experts, and we learned a lot about how the Georgia prisons were set up, not just for the physical setup of the prisons or layout of the prisons, but it was a real eye-opening experience over that 4 to 6 month period to visit, in that case, about 6 prisons and learn not just about the layout, not just about the ADA compliance or the black in the prisons, but also to learn about prison life, to talk to our clients and just find out about the other issues. I had frankly never visited a prison in Georgia. I'd handled death penalty cases in other states, but it was something that really lit a fire, I think, under my lawyers and myself to say, here is a disenfranchised, underrepresented population. It's a virtually unlimited source of clients. for the type of work that we wanted to do, which was constitutional rights litigation, and all on a pro bono basis. And so we requested and we were assigned other cases by Judge Hull and by some of the district judges. Habeas corpus cases, we represented estates of families where prisoners had died in prison, involved failure to provide medical treatment, severe physical abuse by guards, and so on. And I have to say that there was no real rhyme or reason to that. We got some very good results. We developed very good relationships with judges all over the state and with the AG's office, but there was no coherent theme, if you will, to the practice other than work very hard and put a lot of hours in cases that we hope are making an impact, certainly for our clients. And then about 4 years ago, we had a sea change, and this was another great moment in my practice. I guess the eureka moment was meeting attorneys from the Southern Center for Human Rights, Steve Wright's organization. I'm sure most of you are familiar with them. One of the nation's leading constitutional rights organizations, and certainly the leading advocate for prisoner rights in Georgia. And what an amazing group of lawyers and investigators. I mean, we've had this marvelous relationship. They knew we had been doing some of this work. We knew of their work, but we had never coordinated with them. And by developing that relationship, and large outside law firm, commercial law firm, working with people who dedicate their lives to this kind of work, we were able to leverage what we were doing in a way that I hadn't really thought about. I mean, these are folks who were advocating in the legislature. These are folks who were handling these cases and had a much broader perspective about what was affecting Georgia prisoners than we had from our individual cases. And it's allowed us to really understand where we can have the greatest impact. And when we get a case from the Southern Center, when we partner with the lawyers from the Southern Center, I know that the case will have been thoroughly investigated, and I know it's a case where we can make an impact, not just in the lives of our clients or in a prisoner's family, but we actually will affect how prisoners are treated in a particular prison or how policy is pursued in the state. So it's really helps to work with folks who have that kind of perspective. So what do we get out of this? What do I get out of it? I know that's one of the questions we're supposed to answer. I think we all know that you get great satisfaction of helping your clients who are underrepresented, who are disenfranchised. But to make it more personal, I can tell you one of the most moving moments of my career was sitting in the conference room in my law firm across the table from a client and his family after he had been in prison 17 years for crimes he didn't commit, and was there sitting across from us and not spending the rest of his life in prison. He was 35 years old at the time. And knowing that he would be able to go out and get a job and live his life, and we couldn't give him back to 17 years, but we did give him whatever time he had left in his life. To walk into a prison, and I've visited clients in 18 of the 31 Georgia prisons. I know most of them pretty well. But to walk into a prison and know some of the guards, know the administrators in the system, and know that they have changed the way they treat prisoners, that they protect them better, that they provide medical care to people that I don't even know because of the cases that we brought, is something that really affects me deeply. I mean, we take all this for granted. We get sick, we go to the doctor. We get an infection, we go to the doctor. We want to get from one part of our house to another. We just pick up and go. I don't worry that if I'm sleeping at night, a gang member is going to come in and beat me to death because the cell lock doesn't work on my bedroom. These are the kinds of things that we can impact in ways that I never anticipated getting into this line of work. The second thing is I am absolutely passionate about the U.S. Constitution. So we talk about God and Tupac and now. I'll go to James Madison. I really do believe that although it's taken our nation more than 200 years to realize the rights that Constitution. Things were not, people did not have the rights they deserved in 1789. It took many years. But that document, to me, is the greatest legal document ever drafted, and the pearl of that document is the Bill of Rights. And you don't need, if you are in the majority, you don't need, or if you're represented, if you've got representation, you don't need the Bill of Rights because you'll just get the legislature to pass it. That Bill of Rights is needed for prisoners and for minorities and for people that don't have adequate representation, who are disenfranchised. And it's fascinating work. Constitutional work is fascinating stuff. It's complex, it's interesting, and it's always an uphill battle. And without advocates that argue for constitutional rights, the Bill of Rights is just a bunch of words on paper, and that's something that we get to do every day. Third thing is, it's great experience for my young lawyers. They get to spend a lot of time in court. They spend a lot of time in the prisons visiting our clients. And if you come work for me, I tell my associates, you'll do your billable work, and you're going to spend at least 200 hours a year doing pro bono work. That's just the deal. If you don't like it, go work for somebody else. But I guarantee you'll get fantastic training. And a couple of months ago, I realized that the training we're giving them is not just in legal skills. I had a young woman, a fantastic young lawyer, come to me who'd been reviewing the record in the Hades case where three brothers were convicted of a murder. And two of them were not really involved in the murder. And those are we were representing one of them, and she came to me and she said, I've read the record, and we know what our argument is for the brother we're representing. But you know what? That same defense applies to the brother who's also in prison. We have a moral duty to represent him. And I just said, I'm crying. I mean, that's like, now I know we're getting there, And so we're representing the other brother as well. And we're going to work as hard for him as for his brother to get him out of prison as well. And finally, great thing about pro bono work, not just what I do, but what we all do, is it takes you out of your sphere of normal practice. It takes you out of your sphere of normal life. There are fantastic lawyers and judges and people and investigators and social workers and folks I never would have met if I were sitting in my 800-lawyer law firm and doing cases for Fortune 500 companies and not doing pro bono. And that's one of the great joys. It should be why we're all out there practicing law, and one of the reasons I think we all went to law school initially. So it's kind of nice to see that realized when you're years in practice and you still get that exciting thing. So that's our story, and we're going to keep working with the Southern Senate. We love our work.
Do you take checks? Because I don't have cash.
I do.
It might be a picture.
So thank you.
So I'm sure Damon will be here after the session to collect more donations because we want to help Damon get to his goal. And so I'm standing up because yes. And I'm standing up because I want to stand up for service and I want to stand up for pro bono work. I think I have the best of both worlds because I started at Georgia Legal Services. So I was a staff attorney there, and I was in the Gainesville office, and I got an opportunity to actually work with clients, indigent clients one-on-one, circuit ride to counties where, wow, I mean just like way up in North Georgia, just a circuit ride. And it would be so funny because I would be the only black person like go up there, and by the time I got to the courthouse, they would say, "We knew you were here. We knew you were here." And they saw you at Subway. But you embrace it because that in of itself is a learning experience as well. So I really, really enjoyed the counties that I got to circuit ride in and represent clients. So that experience was just great because I knew that once I got into my solo practice that I wanted to continue to do pro bono work and I wanted to continue to give back. Initially I did it because it's like my passion and things I wanted, but also that pro bono work developed into low bono work that eventually developed into paying clients. And so with that, I not only got to take what I had learned from Georgia Legal Services, but I also got to apply those skills and also develop new skills and continue to help people. And now, as I'm the director of the Transitions Law Practice Program for the State Bar, so now I have this huge audience that I get to promote pro bono service to. So at every group mentoring event or beginning lawyers program, there's a snippet in there about giving back pro bono work and service. So I got, as I evolved, I got to work with the client, I got to do law clinics and work with other clients in my solo practice, and then now I get to talk to groups and continue to promote pro bono service. One of the cases that stand out most to me in my practices, I have a Bachelor's of Science in Foreign Service. I have an international law background. So when I used to do law clinics for a lot of shelters, and I would go in and help them with their domestic violence clients who were victims of violence, and they were trafficking clients. We had VAWA clients, violence against women act clients. So I would go in and try to help them with divorces, temporary protective orders, and their immigration cases. And I would go in and do the clinics. I would help some clients for free. Some clients had very little money, so I would kind of help them. And then I'll never forget, one day, I guess when I was 2 years into my solo practice, 1 or 2 years, they called me, a shelter called me and said, we have this lady from Greece, and we don't know what to do with this case because no one knows what to do. Like everyone is like, what? But it was an international child abduction case. And I was like, oh. So, we've had Jesus, we've had Tupac, we've had fire, we've had senior hotline, right? We had prisons. And he's like really hard about the Constitution. Well, I believe in the UN Convention on Human Rights and the Hague Convention. So that's what I stand up for. So basically, what happened is they said, well, can you just sit on this call? It's a mediation, it's an international mediation. My clients were from Greece. She had come here, filed a divorce. They were trying to stop the divorce. And they were like, you just have to just sit in on mediation to see if we can possibly get this to work, get this couple to work things out, and then maybe she can go back and take the child back to Greece. And I was like, okay, I'm glad I studied international law. My worlds are finally colliding. Let's see what I can do with this. So I said, okay. So I sat in on mediation, and we couldn't come to an agreement. So I thought I was done. So about a week later, I got served with a motion for return of challenge this thick from Bono Carlisle. Okay? And I said, what? I'm a new sole practitioner. And I got what? So I called, the shelter and was like, what? They're like, oh, please, we don't have a lot of money, but we can, and I was young and I was new and I didn't realize how much time this case was going to take, how much, manpower, how much money I was going to have to, I didn't realize. So all I know is there was a woman there with a child who had said that she, been molested and that she did not want to go back to her husband. And they were trying to make her go back to Greece. And I was like, I gotta help, right? So all of what I had learned before at GLFP, all of what I wanted to do, for indigent people, all of that just came and I was like, you know what? I'll figure it out. So I started doing my research. And basically, I said, okay. So I responded to it, and it was in the district court, basically. And so it got to the point where I had to bring on another one of my law school friends, and I was like, I can't pay you. But I need your help. And she was like, what? And she said, we're all trying to make it here. I said, I know. I said, well, okay, what about this? I'm going to give you what I have, right? So I'm going to give you a little bit of money, and if you could just start it, you're going to fall in love, and you're going to really fight for this. So she was like, okay. So, I got the little bit of money they had given me, and I would pay her. And I wasn't really making anything off of it. I was just trying to survive off of these other cases that I had. But this case was taking most of my time. So I survived off of prayer. And I knew that it would come back. I just knew that it would. And I just gave what I had to give. And so basically the case progressed. It kept going. So we got to the district court. We got ready. All we knew was what we had learned from our oral arguments and moot court and all that stuff. And she was like, you think we should provide? You think we should do that 3-part folder thing? You think that's what we should do? So we'll have all of your stuff on this side and this and all that.
been talking back and forth to Judge Batten's office about this and just going, and I was just kind of like, you guys, help me help myself, because I'm trying to, I'm new to this. I have an international law background. I believe in these conventions, and I believe in this woman. So we got there. Woman Carl had 3 attorneys, and there was me with my 3-part vote. And I walked in. And he was like, they said, Ms. West, are you ready? And I was like, yes, Judge. I stood up with my 3-part vote, and I was like, you know what? I don't really need this vote at this point, because I am so passionate about this case. I know this case, we have done whatever we needed to do, and I stood up and I argued. And let's go back. Before that, getting to this point required talking to people in Greece, getting people to translate documents, figuring out what their culture is like and what their political system is like, what social services are available for this child if we send her back, what would the mother, would there be any stigma against the mother, would there be any stigma against the child? I was talking to professors at Harvard. We were like all over the place trying to prove our case, just basically going through all the past decisions, trying to figure out what was the most important. So the day of reckoning came, so I went. And I stood up and I said, are you ready, Ms. West? And I said, yes, I'm ready. And so I stood up and I argued, and then he said, okay. So we took a little recess and got back. And then he said, okay, well, I want to think about this some more, and I want you guys to come back, about this issue. So we went back again. Got ready, me and my friend, and I went back. And then so he said, okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead and make my decision on this. And I was sitting there like, okay. So he looked at me and he said, before I give my decision, I would like to talk to Ms. West. And I was like, oh, what have I done? I've tried so hard with what I had. And he said, Ms. West, Womble Carlisle, I understand you're Womble Carlisle. You're Womble Carlisle, but I just need to talk to Ms. West. And he said, Ms. West, I would like to say, you wrote some of the best briefs I've ever seen. And I was like, he said, and Ms. West, I wanted to say that your advocacy was just, right on, and I can tell that you poured your heart into this and you did really well. And I was like, oh, no. And I said, he's getting ready to tell me that I didn't win. And I had to go tell this woman that she's going to have to take this child back to Greece. And I was just like, don't cry. It's okay. So he said, given that, he gave me this long speech about how great I was and that he understands that, I'm just starting my practice. So he basically said that the child was going to have to be returned. We need to figure out what's going to happen with that. And I said, okay, Judge, I think we're going to appeal. And he was like, you realize you're going to be going to the U.S. Court of Appeals? I said, yes. And I was like, oh, God. But I think my client is going to want to appeal this because, we can't take this child back. I understand we can't make this very important. So he said, okay. So at that point, I walked out of the courthouse. I basically aligned myself with an attorney who had been practicing for a while, and we appealed it to the U.S. Court of Appeals. And I was just praying, because I was like, send me something. I don't know what you're going to send me, but I need some help. And you just pray, So anyway, I'm not saying that this is what I got, but the father ended up dying, and my client did not have to send her child back to Greece. I don't know what happened. I don't know. I can't say. All I can say is, she got to stay. And so then I was like, oh, this is over. And then I got this brief talking about, we want to move forward. And I was like, this is moot. I learned that. This issue is moot. Oh, no. But they felt like they had to make a point. I was like, so I wrote my little brief back now. I didn't need anyone for that. I was like, no, this is, private. And so then they kind of said, it is moot, and we're not going forward. But I say that because what I got to do with this experience is I got to take something that I had done, like my undergraduate degree, and then my law degree, it just basically came together and it intersected. And I was like, because my parents always say, when are you going to talk about this UN convention? What about this hate? Like, this is what you want know, the mother couldn't take it, she would never come to court. But I was there all by myself, fighting against these 3 lawyers, advocating for my client, trying to get her, trying so that they could stay in this country. So I learned so much. I got to help someone who would otherwise not have had an attorney. And all the while, and I will never forget this, I went back to federal court because I had a friend who was getting sworn into bankruptcy. Remember that whole spiel I told you the judge told me about, oh, Miss West, your briefs were so good. I was like, uh-huh. So I said, I walked in and his clerk came by because she was taking up, I guess, cards or whatever, where you sign the name or who's sponsoring that person. And I said, hey, Julie. And she said, oh, Miss West, I'm going to tell Judge Patton you're here. And I was like, what? What? And so my friend was like, I was like, so he came out to the bench and he was like, Miss West, where's Miss West? I want to tell you guys about Miss West. And I was like, oh my. And so he went on and told them about me and how I advocated and what great briefs I wrote. And I was sitting there and my friend at this point, she was like, she just thought I was like, there was like a halo. I was like glowing, there was this aura all around me. And, you know, and it was, so I got so much, I say that to say I got so much out of that experience. And although I thought that he was just blowing smoke, I really did have an impact not only on my client, but I had an impact on the court. I hope I had some impact on the holding counsel and for them to continue taking pro bono cases. But I say this, that we have to stand up for pro bono work. We have to stand up for service. We have to promote endeavors of all of these attorneys that are here today. And when you can't do it, you always can write a check, because we can do that. Or we can always promote it to someone else. But what we have to realize is that when we do service, we are doing service for ourselves, and we're doing service for others, because there's so much that you get from doing that work, and there's so much that you give. So remember to find something that you're passionate about, and give your time and energy to that. Thank you.
I'm Phil Holliday, and for the last 30 years I have practiced law at King & Spalding and represented mostly Fortune 100 companies in all kinds of disputes of different types. And that's been very rewarding work that I've enjoyed very much. But I have learned more about practicing law and had more eureka moments doing pro bono work than I had in representing all those great Fortune 100 companies, and with some really good results in those cases. And my first series of eureka moments doing pro bono work actually came before I ever had a law license. I signed up entirely for altruistic reasons my third year in law school, first semester, to do the civil law clinic in Vanderbilt, where I was in school at that time. Tennessee was one of the few states that allowed third-year law students to actually practice law as long as you were being supervised by a lawyer who was a member of the bar. So I enthusiastically signed up for the civil law clinic because, like Larry, I was looking to do more than I was probably qualified or capable of doing at the time. This seemed like, to me, a way I could get an administrative hearing to maybe some appeals work. And so I dutifully showed up, and my first client that I was assigned was a woman who I'll just refer to today as Ms. Davis. And she was in her early 60s. This would have been in the fall of 1983, and she had been summarily thrown off the SSI rolls in 1981, shortly after the Reagan administration came in and began acting on their pledge to clean up Social Security and SSI. And so I got Ms. Davis's file and read through it, and I was just stunned because all the paperwork was in order. She did not deserve to be thrown off the SSI rolls. In fact, she fit every criteria for it. And so I remember thinking as I'm reading through the file before I meet her for the first time, this is a slam dunk.
I mean, not even I can lose this one, no matter how unqualified I am. And so Ms. Davis came in and we had our first meeting, and I went through everything with her and talked to her and said, now our hearing's going to be next week, and if you have any questions, blah. And she said, no, I don't think I have any questions. And I said, well, don't worry, we're going to get this straightened out. And she just looked at me in this new way that now I know so many people who have spent their whole life living below the poverty line or right at the poverty line know and understand that there's no such thing as a slam dunk. That's what your background is. So we go to the first hearing, and the young, fresh-faced law student is just confident this is going to be easy win. The ALJ will probably stop us right in the middle of this decision. So I go and present what I think is an overwhelming case, and the guy from the Social Security Administration stands up and sort of wanders through his presentation, and the ALJ says he needs about 5 minutes, and he comes back in 4 minutes. And I'm stunned. And so as we're walking to the car, it's Miss Davis, the client, trying to console her lawyer rather than the other way around, because she understands a part of the system that I don't. But it was a really valuable experience all the way around for me, because it taught me a number of lessons about never being too sure about how strong your case is. But more importantly, it was a real eye-opener to me about the uphill battle that poor people often face in getting, as Larry said, we take for granted in the society we live in that you will get justice. I won't go through the whole thing, but the story does have a good ending that I'll tell you about a little bit further along. So my second case was an eviction case. And my client was being evicted from the trailer park where he lived. And I came in and met with him, and I only got the case about, I think, 3 days before the actual eviction hearing. It's pretty quick in most places. And he explains to me he's being evicted because his landlord says that he has a disabled car that's parked in front of his trailer, and that's not allowed under the lease. And indeed, it's not allowed under the lease. But he said, you know, that's not really why I'm being evicted. He said, you know, I've lived there for 6 months. That car hadn't run for 4 months, and if you'll come to the trailer park, I'll show you cars up on blocks sitting in that trailer park. But that's not why he's evicting me. He's evicting me because he just found out that I'm in a mixed-race marriage. And he didn't know that, but my wife had to take the check this past month because we were late and paid on the last day. And 2 days later, I get notice that I'm being evicted. So I'm trying to think of anything we can do at that point, because he is in violation of the lease. It clearly says that, and yet that's not the real reason. But the good news, it turned out, was he had recently filed for personal bankruptcy. And so Johnny on the spot lawyer decides, okay, we're going to go into dispossessory court and claim that filing this action violates the bankruptcy statute. And you should have seen the silence in the dispossessory court and the lawyer on the other side when I stood up and announced that we were in bankruptcy court. The dispossessory court judge, who of course has only got to hear about 60 cases that day, couldn't wait to send the case to the bankruptcy court. And so that's what we did. And we ended up going to the bankruptcy court, and the bankruptcy court judge, in truthfulness, went through the criteria, and it wasn't clear that this was going to affect his plan in a way that would justify her insisting it go through her. But she did hold a hearing and heard enough evidence that I got to get out the real reason he was being evicted. And I put on my client, he went through the whole story, and we took a break. And the judge said, okay, I want to talk to lawyers. And he called the lawyers up, and the landlord was going to go on the stand next. And she looked at the lawyer, who, by the way, was a 25 your lawyer, also a graduate of Vanderbilt Law School, and that's going to come forward in a couple of minutes, and said, I'm going to let Mr. Holliday cross-examine your client any way he wants to, because I think I can see pretty clearly what's going on here. Before I do that, I'm going to give you 20 minutes to sit down with Mr. Holliday and his client and see if you can work this out. And we did. My guy couldn't wait to get out of the trailer park, candidly, but he needed time and he had to get his deposit back because otherwise he couldn't do it. And that's exactly the deal that struck. And so now I'm feeling better. I've actually gotten some justice here in my second case, and I couldn't in my first case. 2 days later, I go to the clinic, and there's a note in my box. And the note is from the director of the clinic, and it says, come find me, we need to go see Dean Bostic, who's the dean of the law school. And so I dutifully find Professor Block, we go see Dean Bostic, and he proceeds to read me the letter from the lawyer on the other side, who rails about the job we have done, that you cannot believe Vanderbilt Law School is allowing students and professors to engage in these kinds of activities that he had no business doing, and that he was never giving another penny to Vanderbilt Law School. So now at that point, I'm feeling quiet as confident about the plan, right? So what's going to happen? And so Dean Bostic just looks across the desk and he said, so what's your response? And I said, well, he wasn't evicting him because of the car. He was evicting him because he found out he was in an interracial marriage and the guy's a racist. And, you know, I think we did the right thing. Dean Bostic looked at Professor Block and looked back at me and said, I think he did too. And for your information, over the last 25 years, that guy's given us $525. If we don't get another And I have to tell you, he then said, and he was not a warm and fuzzy guy, Dean Bostic, he said, you know, Phil, that's what's important about being a lawyer. Is when you see injustice, doing something about it. And as long as that's what our students are doing, I don't have any problem with it, and that would be true even if he gave us $10,000 every year. You guys did the right thing. And I have to say, at that moment, it really drove home the point to me that lawyers can make a difference, and that I was headed into a career where I could make a difference. I felt so strongly about it that I volunteered the next semester in the clinic, even though I couldn't get any credit for it anymore. You could only get 3 hours credit once, but I ended up actually doing more the second semester in the clinic than the first. I got to try my first jury trial because they had the first and only jury trial they'd ever had in the civil clinic come up, and by the way, we got the right result. My client was being sued, we got a defense verdict. But back to Ms. Davis. So we lost not only at the ALJ level, but at the first appeals level. But because I continued working on it in the second semester, I also got to file our appeal to the U.S. District Court. And about a month before I graduated, Judge Wiseman ruled in her favor. And the week I graduated, she got a check for $28,000. Never had in her life. It allowed her to get out of the place she was living that she had to move to when she lost her Social Security benefits. And she wanted to give me a graduation present, and I kept trying to tell her that wasn't necessary. But I do still have the crossband that she gave me with my initials on it for my graduation present. So I was hooked for life. And so since I've been practicing law, I have done a variety of pro bono cases. I have done death penalty work. I have done asylum cases. I've done a lot of landlord-tenant cases. Along with a project that my firm has with Atlanta Legal Aid, I've taken non-death penalty habeas cases. And I can tell you that the results have not always been great. Like Larry, I have stood between a mother and a brother while their son and brother was executed in a field in Virginia where the bugs were terrible, and the empty feeling you see when the van comes out and you know what's in that van leaving the prison is a tough one. But the rewards that you get along the way far outweigh whatever the negatives are, because I've also experienced the joy of having a client released from prison who was wrongfully there. Clients get new trials, and a client get asylum and not have to be sent back to their country where they would almost certainly have been killed if they had been returned. And so the question then becomes, why do you continue to do pro bono work? Well, as I said, I have been very lucky in my career to do lots of things. I have helped a client get turned around a $100 million verdict against it in a case that we didn't try. Earlier this spring, I tried a case over in Alabama for another client where there was $1 billion at stake for my client. After 2 weeks, the other side caved. It was a great victory for my client. And they threw a big celebratory dinner, and all of that was really great and gave me a good feeling. But the proudest moment I have ever had as a lawyer came in a Virginia courtroom representing a client who ultimately was put to death. But we got the death penalty sentence reversed at the district court level. But before we knew it was going to be reversed, we had a 3-day gut-wrenching evidentiary hearing where we put on all the mitigating evidence that was not presented at his death penalty trial. And that evidence was so overwhelming that the bailiffs who had brought him from the prison guards who had brought him from death row in Virginia to the courthouse couldn't even look up. They had their heads down and they were trying to hear what this kid's life meant. So at the end of the hearing, and before we know the district court judge is going to rule for us, this barrel-chested bailiff who'd been in the district court system for 30 years came up to me and said, you know what, your client's never had a break in his life. But for 3 days, his lawyers cared more about him than the state cared about putting him to death. And I don't know what will happen with your case, but you make a real difference in somebody's lives, life, and the lives of his family. And I can just tell you, lots of great moments, none better than that. So, what I would encourage you all to do is what you've heard here today. You can sit, you can contribute, you can ride a bike, you can take on criminal cases, you can help people get adoptions, you can help the elderly, you can help people in prison, or you can use your international law background and experience to help clients. But there's something out there that you can contribute and do. And I would encourage you to do it. If you don't know what else is out there and available, contact Phyllis at Georgia Legal Services. Contact Marty at ABLF. Contact Steve Godley at Atlanta Legal Aid. Contact Doug Lamar at the Georgia Justice Project. I can tell you that I've been lucky enough, I've handled cases in about 25 different states since I've been practicing. There is no state that has a better core of people running the nonprofit legal agencies than we have here in Georgia. They will use your talents. They will find something for you to do. And as Damon said, volunteer and take the case, but also give them your monetary support. I've been lucky enough to chair the board of Atlanta Legal Aid, to chair the board of the Georgia Justice Project, And I can tell you, the work those people do every day is amazing. So I have a younger brother who's also a lawyer, although now he's a reform lawyer. But his first job was at Atlanta Legal Aid. And as we would get together on Sunday nights and have dinner, which we did while he still lived in Atlanta, he would tell stories about what he was working on, and I would tell stories about what I was working on. They didn't add up. What I realized then, and what I told him was, doing what I do in a big firm, in many ways, is easy. What's hard and what takes courage is to do every day what the lawyers who work for Phyllis, Marty, Doug, Steve, and others do. You will never regret it. And I urge you to take on a case. You'll feel great. Thank you.
I'm a solo practitioner. I practice primarily family law. I've been a solo practitioner for 6 years, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that I started pro bono work early in my legal career. And to this day, I'm so grateful that I did that because it has made a huge difference. And I feel like I owe a lot to the different legal aid organizations in Metro Atlanta because of that. I was licensed in November of 2008. I incorporated my law firm April 2009. I quit my job June 2009, and I opened up shop July 2009. So at that time, the thought of going to calendar call terrified me, but I wanted that courtroom experience. So one of the best decisions I made that year was to sign up with ABLF and to take on pro bono TPO cases. And the reason I did that was strictly just for courtroom experience. I had no idea that I would gain so many skills by doing that. I went to the TPO training that ABLF offers. So I had my questions ready. I knew how to call a client. I accepted my first client, and at that time, I met my client at their office because I didn't have an office to meet with clients yet. And, you know, I met with them, I prepped her, I asked her all these questions, I went to my TPO hearing, and I went. It was an awesome feeling. So I decided, okay, I'm going to do this in Cobb County too. So I signed up with Cobb Justice Foundation. So I made a rule for myself. I said every single month I'm going to take on 2 TPO cases every month. And I did that for a couple of years. And the reason being is I quickly realized that by taking these cases, I was gaining confidence, I was learning how to do client intake, I was learning how to do client consultations, I was learning how to prep my clients for court, I was learning about client management on top of the trial skills that I was learning. I did not anticipate any of that. And when I would go to court in Fulton County, there were these seasoned attorneys there that were eager to help me. I didn't even have to ask for help half of the time. We would just sit there in court and we would talk, and they would just give me these tips. They would offer to meet me for lunch, and they just gave me so much knowledge on running my business, dealing with clients, and I would watch them as they would give their presentation. They were very polished, so I was able to learn a lot by observing them. In Cobb County, I was able to actually make some money. And for a brand new solo, that was exciting for me. Some of my pro bono TPO clients, they became my divorce clients. Other attorneys, they would send me their clients as well because either they did not do divorces or their clients just could not afford them. I was hungry, so I took them. And then Cobb Justice, after I took so many of their cases, they started sending me their clients that for whatever reason did not qualify for pro bono divorce services. So I took them as well at a discounted fee for them. So I did this for a couple of years, and then eventually I decided that I was going to do something that I was, again, terrified to do, which was to take on a full-blown family law matter. I was afraid that if I took on a contested divorce case or custody case, that it would suck up all my time and I would regret it. But I decided I was going to do it. So I signed up with Georgia Legal Services, and I took my first full-blown family law case, since that's what I do. And it was It was an awesome experience. I did not regret it. My client was very appreciative. I felt good about being able to help. I felt good about being able to provide full services to my client, and it felt good to work with the client for over all of that time. Something that I did, even with that first client, is I sent them a bill every single month, the quote-unquote bill. So whenever I bill my private clients, I bill my pro bono clients. And the reason I do that is so that, one, so they can associate a value with my time, so it helps them to appreciate what I'm doing for them. Two, it allows them to recognize that I'm treating them the same as my paying private clients. Like, just because your case is pro bono, that does not mean you get second citizen treatment. Like, I'm treating you the same. You mean just as much to me as my private clients, and they appreciate that. And the other reason I do that is because it cuts down on the phone calls. So they learn to expect to receive this quote-unquote bill every month, so they can see exactly what I'm doing on their case every month, and they know that I am working on their case. So they tend to call me less because of that. So now my rule for myself is I have one open pro bono case at all times, one family law case. But in reality, it's actually 2 or 3 cases that I have open at all times. Like for example, now I have 3 cases open. And another benefit of doing this now, I don't necessarily need the courtroom experience, but it's still helpful to me as a solo practitioner, because as a solo, it's really, really easy to hear someone's sad story, their life story, and it's really easy to want to help everybody that comes to your door, but you cannot do that. At the end of the day, you're still running a business. So by me having this rule where I take cases from the different legal aid organizations, when someone comes to me directly and they have the story, I don't feel that guilt anymore when I say, I'm so sorry, I can't help you, because I know that I personally am doing what I can to help the community. So I don't only believe it, but I live it. I think that all solo practitioners should provide pro bono services. It's a win-win-win situation for everyone. It's a win-win for you, for the client, and for legal aid. So I would try to encourage young lawyers to get involved and provide pro bono services. It's really, as a solo practitioner, you are your own boss, so I really don't see why you can't at least take on 1 case a year if that's all the time that you have, or write a check. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, wasn't that fabulous? I mean, everybody here had a unique experience, and I'm sure that those of you in your practices will have a unique aha, eureka moment doing the pro bono work that is so valuable. So once again, thank all of our panelists for participating today. And I know we ran over a little, but these stories were just so compelling. And I was taking notes, I just had to hear them. So, you know, we were moved, we were brought to tears, some of us. And I just say, let's all get busy, and we'll also have those wonderful aha moments. So we're going to take about maybe 2 minutes and clear. Do we have any questions? Yes. Nathan has a comment.
Well, if there are any questions, certainly get those first, but I did have an announcement.
Okay, are there any questions of any of our panelists before we move them around? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Elmore?
All right, lots of pro bono stuff going on at the meeting. If you don't remember, the Georgia Legal Services Program has a silent auction going on. Be sure to stop by that, support it, spread the word. Also, tomorrow morning, if you're looking for an opportunity to bike in Georgia County, the cab counts. So we've got a pro bono fun run and bike ride. It's the first year that we're including a bike ride in that fun run. Mike and others, including the Young Lawyers Division, have put this together each year at the annual meeting for a run. But this is a bike ride tomorrow. Rolling hills and snow mountains, not much of a challenge. We leave we leave at 7 a.m. Won't be more than an hour. It should be fun.
You'll tell us about it. Thank you. Do we have a couple minutes for a 5-minute bio break?
Feel the ball.
Okay, 5-minute bio break. See you back.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, Judge Victoria. Now, do you mind? I'm going to ask you, the judge is separate. Do you want to be filmed today or not? It's up to you. You go with that? Okay. And if there's something that you prefer not, you can remove it. Okay.
Where do you want me to sit? Here?
Oh, okay. I'm all over that. When we were the,
I've got the camera right there. And I'll be able to use scoot for one more.
How about right here? Can I sit here? Can I sit next to it? Can I sit next to it?
Sure. Okay, I'm recording. Good morning again. Thank you all for staying. I appreciate it. Our next panel is about judicial involvement in pro bono, or judicial support of pro bono. I've been around for a while. In fact, when I was a baby pro bono coordinator lawyer, whatever that is, many years ago, we always talked about how you could use judges in your local rural areas to support pro bono, to get lawyers more tuned in with pro bono. But we always thought, what are those concrete things that lawyers can actually do to make life easier for a pro bono attorney? Are there things that they could do? Are there things that they could say at local bar association meetings? What are they allowed to do in terms of the rules? And there's a lot swirling around that. But the ABA recently is now promoting a new pro bono model rule for judges, or a new approach to that. So we're going to talk a little bit in this next session about how judges can promote or support pro bono. What are some of the rules? What are the ideas that they may have? What are their thoughts on access to justice and pro bono generally? And how that translates into better outcomes for all of you here in the room in terms of your experiences as pro bono lawyers and for clients who are seeking access to justice. Today we've got Chief Justice Thompson. And thank you very much for coming, Chief. Judge Marshall from Dougherty County Superior Court, who's here all the way from Albany, Georgia today. I think she gets the award for this particular CLE. Judge Marshall is also a former alum of Georgia Legal Services Program and the Albany office down there, and we're really pleased to have you here today. And then we have another Georgia Legal Services alum. There's something going on in the water down here in South Georgia, but this is Judge Mark D'Antonio, who's a probate judge in Columbus, Georgia. We're glad to have you all three. Judge, Chief Justice, let me start with you. You have some remarks about pro bono role of the judges.
Thank you very much. I don't know how we're going to follow that first panel, and I see some really excellent people on the last panel as well. But good morning. Good morning. And thank all of you for being here. I want to direct most of my comments to why this work is so important. Most of you don't know, but I've been off the trial bench for more than 21 years now. So I'm going to defer to my colleagues on this panel who are trial judges regarding specifics of making pro bono activities and finding clerical and other resources to help them do their jobs. But, having said that, I want to say on behalf of the Supreme Court of Georgia and the Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism how very, very proud we are of all of you who volunteer your knowledge and skills to represent those legal needs. Your stories are powerful and inspirational and embody the principles that to whom much is given, much is expected. You are living examples of this, and I hope that you're grateful for all that you have received in return. I know you are. Nevertheless, it's important that your ranks grow, and let me say why. I believe one of the challenges we face in the future is access to justice. Equal justice for all is a promise embodied in our Constitution and envisioned by our forefathers. Supreme Court Justice Lewis Powell called equal justice, and I quote, "perhaps the most inspiring ideal of our society. It is fundamental that justice should be the same in substance and availability without regard to economic status." Close quote. As Georgia continues to grow in population and diversity, access to justice is a challenge requiring the commitment and hard work of us all. Critical to the success of the judiciary is the public's trust and confidence, but to safeguard its future, we must guarantee access to justice for all people. As our laws were not made for just a few, too many hard-working Georgians believe that justice is out of their reach, either because it's too expensive or because of where they live. According to the National Center for Access to Justice, when it comes to access to attorneys, Georgia ranks in the bottom 10 states. The lack of legal services is amplified in rural areas. According to a study by the University of Georgia, nearly 40% of the South's persistently poor counties are right here in Georgia. 70% of our state's lawyers work in the 5-county metropolitan Atlanta area. 62 counties have fewer than 10 lawyers, and 6 of Georgia's counties have no lawyers at all. Those of us who are judges are seeing a growing number of people coming to court with no lawyer and trying to represent themselves, particularly in divorce and other domestic relations cases. When people are unrepresented in court, often their interests are not championed. Judges don't have the information they need to make just decisions, and the courts are burdened in time and resources. This past year, under the leadership of outgoing President Patrice Perkins Hooker, the State Bar of Georgia, and under the sponsorship of House of Representatives Committee Chairman Alex Applewood of Glenn County, legislation was introduced to encourage private civil attorneys to work in severely underserved rural areas of Georgia. Under this legislation, a small number of law school graduates would receive annual assistance to help pay off their law school debts. And in exchange, the attorneys would agree to work 5 years in those Georgia counties that desperately need legal help. This pilot project would be just a small start, but it would be a good start. It did not pass this year, but I'm hopeful that it will this next session. In the meantime, I encourage judges, the State Bar, and all of you to do as much as you can, to recruit more lawyers, to join the ranks of those who donate their knowledge and skills to those who need legal representation. Thank you again for all that you do. We, at the appellate level, I think, are somewhat handicapped about what we can do other than encourage. But these trial judges can do a lot more meaningful things. I'm always reminded of the time that somebody told me early on in my career on appellate bench that if you can get 3 people to agree with you, you can say what the law of Georgia is. What they did not tell me though was how difficult this gets for people to read. But I know Judge Jolly's here and others that have experience as a trial judge and the power and the authority that you command is dramatic. You can make things happen for good or ill, but you can sort of make things happen. I'm as anxious as you to hear how these judges approach this. Judge Martin.
Thank you, Justice Thompson. And thank you all for this invitation today. I'm Denise Marshall from the Doherty Judicial Circuit. I've had the pleasure of serving on the Doherty Superior Court since 2009, so I've been in court for 6 years at this time. I did work for Georgia Legal Services for more than a decade, so there are a lot of friendly and familiar faces that I've known for quite some time present in this room. You know, it just never fails. In life, you always seem to, in the most innocuous ways, get more than what you give. And today has been consistent with that. The panel of presenters and the stories that they told were warming and chilling and just took me back, quite frankly. Justice Thompson wants to hear from us, the judges, but as a trial judge, let me say how grateful we are for the work that you do in this room. As a judge, we support pro bono work because it's so wonderful in so many ways. Not to mention some of the things that Chief Justice Thompson's talked about in terms of just cases and fairness, but the general access to justice. I bring you greetings from Southwest Georgia. Some of those counties that have no lawyers are in Southwest Georgia. Southwest Georgia is different. The economics, the legal access is all totally different. If you all are from the metro area and have really never been to Southwest Georgia, you just don't, it's something you gotta live. You know, I can't describe it to you. You gotta be there. We have fewer lawyers. We're more economically depressed with the infusion of all the advertising by plaintiffs' lawyers. Things are getting more depressing. But I'm not knocking that, but I'm just saying what is. So the court, we are seeing an incredible number of pro se litigants, underdeveloped cases. I am an old legal services attorney. I mean, I still have that sensitivity. So I want to listen. I want to help. But the times that I have to say, you know, I can't be your lawyer and your judge, you know, we need help. A lot of what we are asking attorneys to do in our community is to help support self-help clinics and do free consultations or videos or whatever to help us help pro se litigants. I oftentimes shudder to think how incomplete some of the remedies that I may be signing off on are because the litigants just didn't know how to be inclusive and comprehensive in what they do. So pro bono attorneys are welcome and encouraged. From the bench, I think we have at least a threefold duty, and that is to acknowledge the work that you do. Pretty much like Ms. West is in the back, how the federal judge acknowledged her work, her effort, her passion, and her commitment. I think we all want to be acknowledged. Or it's good for others to see us acknowledged. So I think that's a part of what has to come from the bench. We acknowledge your commitment. Where you put your time and your treasure says a whole lot about you. And I don't think there's anything wrong with acknowledging that. We have also a duty to help you educate, to participate in educational productions where we help train lawyers. There's nothing wrong with that. But we are a part of training efforts for new lawyers or for lawyers who are stepping out of their vein, so to speak, to help them do something a little different than what their expertise is. So I think the judiciary, being a part of that training, takes it to a different level for most people. And I think we have to step up and publicly promote pro bono work. I mean, this program to me was just like absolutely awesome. I just wish I could get a microcosm of this. I'm somebody, but this got to be a bar meeting for Georgia County. Just not the whole panel, but at least 2 or 3 to tell your varied stories, because they were truly compelling, you know? And a lot of people may not take the time to come to the bar CLE to kind of get this. I will be speaking, if John can help me on this, but I'll be speaking to the Council on Superior Court Judges. We need the pro bono push. I think we all do it in our own way, and we're very grateful for what we get, but I think the judiciary can do more. And it's, I mean, we're all in this sort of together. Because like I said, particularly in family matters, in family cases, if we don't push our pro se divorces, they sit there. Some of us have more assistance in terms of law clerks and the like, but if it was not for young lawyers and legal services, I don't know what we do. We just clock the dockets, because you find yourself being, you tread a thin line. You know, you want to move the case, you want to resolve these issues that we know. Like I said, old legal services lawyer. I mean, it's still in you. This is maybe not the most compelling case you've had this month, but it's a very important case. It's a life-altering case for those particular litigants, and you still and you want to help with that. But it's only, I mean, you do have to wear your judicial hat. And so I think promotion of pro bono work and acknowledging those who do the work, your colleagues watching. You know, if you get great accolades at the bar meeting or at other publicly, other people hear and they want to join those ranks. It is nothing like making a difference, even from the bench. You know, we see it and we know it. Ms. Gail talked about her adoptions, and we were just back there talking. We judges are human too. Like I said, old legal services lawyer, still feel good about adoptionism, and I know I can bat 100 on that. Generally speaking, I can please everybody in the courtroom. Okay. I had a different experience this past week when I had a contested divorce. That was not a feel-good moment, but I generally can count on my adoptions for that warm and fuzzy feeling. And a lot of my custody cases too, if they're well done. And representation is needed so much in our cases. So I applaud you, I encourage you. Like I said, I gotta have part of this program come to Georgia County, okay? Because and some of you presenters, I need volunteers to tell those stories so that we can get Southwest Georgia up and running again. Legal Services has carried most of that burden for us. We do have volunteer attorneys who work for various agencies like the Council on Aging or the Lily Pad or our domestic violence shelter. We do have that participation. But we need so much more because of we're economically depressed for the most part, and it's hard to retain attorneys. But for pro bono, legal services, other public interest groups, you know, we would really be struggling. But with a dynamic profession such as this, I look forward to us turning the corner and great legislation being passed so that we have, you know, so that we have adequate representation in civil cases. I did legal services for more than a decade, and then I started judging. And I started out in city court, magistrate court, and superior court. And I thought the worlds were two different worlds, but they're really not. My legal services clients followed me right on over to the criminal side, okay? So I still know all the same people, and they have the same issues. The subject matter is a little different, but representation is still critical to their existence. And we're in the business of making crooked places straight or a little less jagged. You are to be commended for what you do. Keep doing it and help us do more. Thank you very much.
These are really tough shoes to follow, everyone that's spoken today. I know in listening to the Eureka moments, I was thinking about a number of Eureka moments I had from going back to even before I was admitted to practice law. Also, I feel like in this crowd here, I'm just preaching to the converted. I think we really need to have the folks that are a little harder to persuade about pro bono activities and stuff, and maybe one of the missions of everyone in this room is to really get to the folks that aren't converted yet. As I said, I'm pleased and honored to be here. There's a couple of different points I've tried to make, and now they're all a little bit scattered, but I think I want to talk about pro bono generally and then tie it into the probate court in particular, because a lot of folks that practice law for a long time don't necessarily come to the probate court too often. One of the things I remember when I worked for Georgia Legal Services for 14 and a half years, one of the hardest things I found I had to do was say, well, I know your legal problem is very, very important to you, but we have 6 lawyers serving 21 counties around Columbus, and so we have to prioritize the type of cases we take. And I'm sorry, not to be flip about it, but I'm sorry you're not being beaten or there's not allegations of molestation, so we can't get involved in your divorce. That was really, really hard for me. And in fact, part of something when I left legal services, but still wasn't confined by some of the rules of the judicial canons, was to really push starting a family law information center in Columbus. There had been some old guard attorneys that really need to be cajoled more, that were very opposed to even having standard forms in family law cases. The theory behind that was they'd be taking money out of their pockets. And most of the folks that were filing pro se divorces or things like that, that legal services couldn't help folks with, were not people that were going to be able to hire a lawyer. And one of the other things tied to the probate court, some people not having access to justice and getting a divorce meant they come to the probate court and lie on their marriage license application in order to get remarried. I can tell some funny stories about when we catch people at those kind of things, and husband shouldn't take the fifth when you asked if you knew about your wife's prior marriage. Anyway, that's really beyond the scope of this. So we did get a family law information center started with the help of Lauren Meskin and myself, and basically we got standard forms up and running, and to sort of cajole some of the attorneys that were opposed to us actually even giving some advice about how to fill out the forms to folks in domestic cases, we picked the lowest hanging fruit. We said that on Friday mornings from 10 to 12, we'll have volunteer attorneys available to help you fill out forms related to legitimations. And of course, the Superior Court judge sent down a note saying, please help this person complete the child support worksheets. We would do that too. And I started recruiting attorneys to volunteer pro bono to help, and I was also there, and as I said, when I became the judge, it became a little bit trickier about me. It's hard to get the legal services out of it. We'll just put it that way. So that's one of the ways I was specifically able to try to get more access to justice in terms of assisting pro ses and still getting pro bono attorneys that didn't want to necessarily get into full representation, but we came up with something that clarified we were giving you legal information, and while you may have received a little bit of advice today, when you walk out the door, we're not representing you anymore, and some other things like that. The other thing that is really clear to me is that the legal needs of, especially in West Central and Southwest Georgia, far exceed the capacities of Georgia Legal Services, Atlanta Legal Aid, and all the other pro bono programs around. In fact, I'm now trying to keep statistics, but I think more than 50% of the filings in my court are pro se. And that can be good, that can be bad. Actually, something that Judge Marshall also said, I didn't realize how many of my clients from legal services also were involved in the probate court. A few of them with involuntary psychiatric commitments, who knew? But that was something that I didn't realize was going on. The probate court does have some advantages in that we do have standard forms that can help facilitate pro se folks. Justice Thompson said about getting people to agree. The one committee I would never sit on with the probate judges council is their forms committee. It seems like I can't imagine how you can get folks to agree about those forms, and you do seem to change them fairly regularly. Some other things, I don't know how many of you really have practiced in probate court. Anyone? Okay. When I do these presentations for folks I actually do something called the CIT, which is a crisis intervention for law enforcement. I sometimes call it how not to shoot the mentally ill. But when we talk about these things, I ask them if they've ever been to the probate court, and some people, very few people raise their hands, and then I ask them if they got married in Georgia, and then they realize, yes, they did, and arguably the happiest things that go on in probate court are the gun permits and marriage licenses. And when I was working at Legal Services, I had occasionally went into probate court for a temporary guardianship, but I always associated it with dead people's property. And literally millions of dollars of estate property does pass through my signature each week, and getting that correct is very, very important. It's not really where my passion is. And one thing that the probate court really does do is looks out for vulnerable people. Whether that's compromised claims involving minors or incapacitated adults, temporary guardianships, which are more and more becoming like custody cases. In fact, I had a contested dissolution of a temporary guardianship where we ended it with a parenting plan for a grandma. But so we do those things. I see some of the richest people in the community and some of the poorest people in the community come through the probate court. The standard forms really do help for non-complicated matters, but there are some things where there is a standard form to do an adult guardianship and conservatorship. It's 49 pages long. In fact, actually, we do this little clinic, which is my little flyer here. I figured I had to bring some kind of materials with me. So there's the flyers there about our clinics. When we do the little PowerPoint presentation, we tell them about the 49 pages and say, do not hit print all in bringing them down. One of the things that actually, as I said, is looking out for vulnerable people in addition to minor children. Wednesdays at the probate court in Columbus is Psychiatric Commitment Day. We do a lot of, actually with the closing of Southwest Georgia Regional Hospital, we have, 9:30 is our crisis stabilization unit hospital commitment hearings. That's the Bradley Center. 10:30 is West Central Georgia Regional Hospital, which are either people coming off of forensic commitments or folks from Judge Marshall's neck of the woods, since they don't have a state hospital down there anymore. And then 1:30 in the afternoon is something that we're very progressive about, our community service board, our behavioral health board. We do outpatient psychiatric commitments with the idea that an outpatient commitment can prevent somebody from being put back inpatient. If I issue an order saying, thou shalt take your medicine, thou shalt go to the doctor, thou shalt abstain from drugs or alcohol, thou shalt go to psychosocial rehabilitation. And if you don't, I can find you in contempt, can sometimes motivate people to not end up re-hospitalized. And I do cajole attorneys to represent the mental health consumers in those cases on a pro bono or very low bono basis. So I actually do pay the attorneys that I do have to pay to represent folks in these more than the juvenile court, which I probably shouldn't be saying this on camera. But one of the things that's always bothered me is you could have attorneys from very expensive, fancy law firms out of Atlanta fighting in state court on the 11th floor of the government center over a car wreck, and maybe there's $50,000 to $100,000, not even a huge claim, but there's something. And those attorneys I know are making well over $250 an hour for the most part. And then you could have a parent whose parental rights are being terminated downstairs in the juvenile court, and that attorney that's representing that parent is making $30 an hour. There's something wrong with our system that we allow that to happen. So I pay him $75. But, so what have I done to try to encourage pro bono in the judiciary with as close to pushing that line about the judicial canons? One thing is we do have a guardian ad litem panel. Guardian ad litems I use guardian ad litems, especially sometimes when there's a pro se matter going on and I really need, and I feel it's not being adequately handled. A guardian ad litem can be a great way to move that along. My guardian ad litem panels, sometimes those cases are pro bono. In fact, actually, I strongly imply without requiring that if you want to be on our guardian ad litem panel, you need to commit to taking at least one pro bono case a year. And that seems to have worked out because some guardian ad litem cases can pay pretty well. Likewise with our county conservators, some can pay pretty well, others are essentially pro bono cases. The other thing that we've been working on lately, because this has been a bit of a heartbreak for us, is we have a number of parents that have been raising their developmentally disabled child all their lives. And the child turns 18 and now the doctors say, we can't talk to you about your child. Or I even had one case that the person called up here, she was living in public housing, and that person's child was turning 18 or 19 and it was time for recertification, and their housing authority was pushing back about, you don't have guardianship over this adult, and how do we know, and all that. Actually, this might be something just to think about for screening. I sent that person to legal services to call their screening line. I said, tell them it's a housing case. But it got rejected as being, oh, we don't do guardianships. Now, my associate judge is the former managing attorney at Georgia Legal Services in Waycross. So it's real hard to get this out of our systems. And what we've now tried to do, especially geared towards low-income people with developmentally disabled children that are turning 18 or 19, and there's HIPAA, which you all have heard of, but there's also FERPA. I don't know if you're familiar with, I call FERPA the HIPAA of education. And both of those things can be very, very daunting for parents of people with developmental disabilities or even on the autism spectrum, a variety of different things. So in order to try to meet this need, because I don't think really one can do guardianships and conservatorships very well pro se. Well, it depends on your level of sophistication, but there's a lot of lawyers around that really mess them up pretty badly. It's hard, you have to, if you read the rules and follow the directions and read the orders for service and get the times right, but I don't know, that's sometimes very hard for folks to do. And I consider guardianships and conservatorships one of the most important things and one of the most serious matters that you can ever do. The person that was passionate about the Constitution, well, I'm taking away your civil rights, including your right to marry, including pretty much the way I describe it and when we do our little guardianship clinics is I'm taking an adult and turning them back into a child and deciding who's going to be the parent for health and safety issues and who's going to be the parent related to the money. And that's a very, very, very serious matter. So what we've decided to do is quarterly, in cooperation with Georgia Legal Services and a nonprofit called the Disability Service Center that's trying to become a one-stop shop for people with disabilities in our region. We are doing adult guardianship clinics on a quarterly basis. How it works so far is myself and Judge Crawley get up there and we do a PowerPoint dog and pony show about what a guardianship can do and what a guardianship can't do for folks and how involved it is and how serious a matter it is. And then we've recruited a number of pro bono attorneys to be available to then sit down with folks that might, well, folks that meet Georgia Legal Services income criteria, and then they can capture that as a pro bono case, and those that don't meet the criteria, just to help them fill out the pro se forms. And then what we also do is have a pro bono attorney that sits on this panel agreed to be the attorney to represent the alleged incapacitated adult. And this seems to have worked so far so good in terms of I have probably 10 or 15 attorneys, and given that 70% of all the lawyers in Georgia practice in the 5-county metro area, to pull 10 or 15 attorneys to be pro bono attorneys in probate court has been, I think, is a success. I can also point out that some of those, the folks that go to the adult guardianship clinics aren't people that are income eligible. We've had a doctor of a severely mentally ill child come to the clinic, and so occasionally those pro bono attorneys get some paying clients out of the deal. In fact, that's sort of been the kind of how I've been selling it to folks. I think it's successful. Our next one is July 24th. And
So you're looking for some volunteers potentially?
well, or as I said, you're welcome to come down to Columbus. You're also welcome to, this is something I know that some of the judges around the state are also experimenting with different ways of accomplishing this.
So Judge, they could volunteer for you for a couple times to learn and bring it back to their own area, right?
I would love to see if we can export this further, and I'd be glad to talk with any of the probate judges in the state about how to make this work and as easy as possible for them. One of the things actually in thinking about also how I can help pro bono attorneys is I try to make it as easy as possible. If you told me that you're representing this person because you got a referral from Georgia Legal Services and you're handing me an affidavit of indigence, I'm not going to question the affidavit of indigence. Can't tell you how many probate courts I would go to trying to do a temporary guardianship where I was told if you can't feed the child, you can't, if you can't pay the court costs, you can't feed the child. And I've always sort of wanted to take that up, but you sort of pick your battles. I do try to make it easy in terms of those things. I treat all of the attorneys that are coming to us with respect, and I'm very appreciative of everything they do. As I said, I am interested in doing anything else I can to make it easier for pro bono attorneys. Also with the clinics, the way I sell that and the way it's been sold with our legitimation family law information centers, it makes it easier for the judges. Having standard forms, having attorneys that can help at least give people guidance about whether or not jurisdiction and venue are appropriate or things like that can really help the judges. Having folks talk about what the parenting plan is, things like that also can be very helpful. I don't know if I've really hit the points that y'all wanted me to hit.
Well, I actually have a question for all of you, if you don't mind. This may put you on the spot, and if it does, my name is Doug Amar. It's I've noticed, and you've actually touched on this, I've noticed out in rural Georgia where we have some court-based help centers that we've got a legal aid program, plus their pro bono program, plus the court-based help services. We don't have a lot of involvement necessarily from the organized local bar associations there. I'm wondering why that is, and if you have any ideas of how we can fix that. How we can bring lawyers into supporting that and becoming part of that structure for low-income people.
I don't know why it is, but Southwest Georgia, Albany in particular, which I've painted as being strange territory, we seem to be bridging that gap quite a bit. And I think it has to do with bar involvement. Our law librarian in Dougherty County is very active in the local bar and on access to justice committee. So it just depends upon the whole dynamics. We seem to be closing that gap. I will have to close a little bit further, but we seem to be closing that gap in terms of collaboration and us all coming together and putting those pieces of the puzzle together. Because going back to all these standardized forms, our part of the state has a low literacy rate and educational level. So you do all the forms you want to do. They still are challenged to complete them. So that's why the clinics and limited scope representation and all that is so important for us, for lawyers who don't want to take on the case full blast and lawyers who might not want to write a check. Consider just limited scope representation helping them to do, just to go over the forms, get the jurisdiction right, get you, make sure it's verified, answer the relevant questions when you're talking about indigency affidavits. I mean, I have people who can't get that right. They want me to approve the finding. I don't mind, but you got to give me something to stand on. But I think we're closing that gap. The bar inclusion, back to your question, I think, is helping that.
A lot of the rural areas of Georgia, I think, are fairly disorganized as far as local bars are concerned. Now, one thing I see as a salvation that may not come in time for a lot of people, but I think is necessarily coming, is this leadership academy that the Wild E's do. They are recruiting people based on diversity of practice, based on diversity of geographic regions of the state, and I think that they're going to take a lot of the ideas that they are exposed to back to their local communities and make them actually flourish down there. I think that also if there is apparent exposure to the judges around the state for a lot of these things too, judges could be very instrumental in doing much more than they already do. I know that in some areas, judges don't want to mess with the bar. They just don't want to for their own reasons. And a lot of judges don't like a very active bar. Active bars are a problem. And so there's some negative inertia that has to be overcome as far as judges are concerned. But I really do believe this Wild E push on the Leadership Academy is going to be big in terms of dividends in years to come. The big bar, I think, is not as energetic as the Wild E is, but the big bar can have a big influence on it, and certainly judges can have a big influence. But I think a lot of people are just afraid to do some of this stuff. And I know that some of these practice areas have gotten unbelievably complicated over the years through legislation that's been passed and practices that exist in there, and people are afraid of it. But I think if people can get exposed to it and realize that it's hey, this is something I can do, I think that there'll be a lot more people that have wonderful stories like those we heard earlier today. That's all. Hey, Damon's biking it all over the state, so but I think that's the deal. I think we've got to be more energetic about putting this into practice all over the state.
I actually think that the reason why the gap is closed in Albany has to do with the leadership of the chief judge of each of the Superior Court circuits. And I guess Judge Lockett is more preaching to the converted. But I really
another legal services.
but I think that really, to be honest with you, the chief judge, in fact, actually Judge McBride, who's our chief judge, I've had ongoing conversations with him, and I think that that's key. That leadership, in terms of reaching out to the bar, is key to bridging that gap more in terms of the answer. And so, to the extent we can pass that on.
I wish we could look to legal services as a corporation to be more helpful in the years to come, but I think that their funding is going to continue to shrink, at least in the foreseeable future. There are a lot of people in the Congress that don't like what legal services stands for, don't like what they do, and look at them as troublemakers, and as a consequence, they're not going to be, I don't believe, very supportive in the years coming forward. So I think this is going to be something that is going to be more on our doorstep than it is going to be on Congress's doorstep. So.
Well, thank you, Chief Justice. Judge Marshall, Judge Antonio, really appreciate your comments today. We're going to transition to the next panel. It's just a matter of...
Thank you all.
need CLE credit for today and you haven't already registered for this, but you just popped in to see it, there's a self-reporting affidavit on your desk. Or you can also just email me, probono@gabar.org, or Doug Ashworth at CLE. I'll hand them out for you. Yeah. I'm trying to find Doug. Open up and then inside. So do you want to? Okay.
You want to operate this moment to talk?
Do you mind operate the camera and then?
Everybody, this has been fabulous.
Bring it home.
It's like the end of a great sermon. It's crescendo now. So we're going to end up today with the hows and the whys of doing pro bono work. I mean, I think you've heard a lot of that from our excellent attorneys. I'm hearing the buzz. I want you to share what's been going on today for the rest of the weekend. But now we're going to hear from our guys and one lady. We have Doug Amar, we have Marty Ellen, we have Teddy Reese, and we have Jana Edmondson Cooper. I'm going to let them talk about what they do. And they all do something very different. Doug does it on the criminal side, Marty does it on the civil side in Atlanta, Teddy does it in rural Georgia, Southwest Georgia, and Jana does it in another language. So let us, you all have decided what to talk and how to talk, so let's roll. And I think
what we thought we'd do is spend really 2 minutes talking about what our programs look like and then take questions. We can always talk more if there are questions, but the sense in the room is you may have questions about how you can apply your particular talents to the programs that are offered here. So let's do it that way. But in English would be better.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you again to Averita, to Mike Monahan for inviting me to serve on the panel today. And what I'm going to talk about very briefly, this is tough. You know, lawyers trying to give us a time limit. That's a mix, right? But we're going to talk about language access and how that is integral really to pro bono work. As Chief Justice Thompson mentioned in his address to the legislature, Georgia only has 154 licensed interpreters to serve the entire state. So as we know, we have 159 counties. We don't even have one interpreter for each county. That does not get into the statistics regarding having interpreters of certain languages. Of course, our most popular language is Spanish, but we have other critical masses of languages that are needed, and that doesn't get into, when we get out into rural Georgia, having access to those qualified interpreters. Just on average, the percentage of people when they take their certification exam here in Georgia, our average pass rate is only 4%. So first-time test takers who are taking the certification exam, and these are folks, many of which, they are taking the exam in their native language. And so that goes to emphasize that being bilingual is not sufficient enough of a qualification to be a competent, accurate interpreter. And so getting to the gist of it, talking about pro bono, we have a handout here that I'll pass out to you that you can keep, and I won't insult your intelligence because I know we all know how to read, so I won't go through it. But this just talks about how to find an interpreter and how to work with an interpreter. Very important is knowing how to find it. I have the privilege of serving on the Supreme Court's Commission on Interpreters, and we are the regulatory body for governing the use of interpreters in the state and providing education to the courts. We have an online registry that is available online of all the licensed interpreters in the state, according to the county in which they live, and also by language, which is an excellent resource. Also, you will find there, and it's very important in your pro bono practice, don't be afraid of the language barrier. You can find interpreters who can assist you with the communication, because that is what an interpreter does. They take out that language barrier for you, and you're able to communicate with that client as if they were English speaking. But there is really a need for individuals who don't speak English as a primary language, whether it's they speak a foreign language or they speak sign language because they're deaf or hard of hearing. So I'm going to stop it there, and so that we can make sure that everyone gets a chance. But I really want us to think about that, and hopefully we will be able to work on some projects here in Georgia. I know in Texas, for example, they have a pro bono bank of interpreters available to pro bono attorneys, and I'm hoping that that is something that we can hopefully get started here in Georgia. Mike.
I got your email.
So with that, I'm going to turn it over, but I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm a self-proclaimed language access nerd, so I never get tired of talking about this topic because it is very, very important for us to make sure, Thompson, I think, put it best, that we have access to justice for all, not just those who can afford it, and not just those for whom English is a second language.
Sure, I'll be glad to. Hello, everyone, and thank you again for being here, and thank you for the distinguished individuals that we've heard from previously. I am the Director of Community Operations and Affairs for Georgia Appleseed Center for Law and Justice, and we focus on policy reform through law and justice. And there are some materials in the book that show you more about method, our three-stage method of finding sufficient research and data to support projects that we choose to take on. The next step is writing a report by usage of pro bono attorneys and other assistants, disseminating that information, and then encouraging the community to take actions. We have quite a few projects going on right now, but in the limited time that I have left, I do want to talk to one that's currently very dear to our hearts that we're working very hard on, and that is our race law enforcement and the law project. And you'll see a description of that has been passed out to you. Georgia Appleseed felt the need to take on this project because we knew that we had the respect and the encouragement from the community to handle this project from a perspective that's fair to all. I have law enforcement members that are part of my family, first cousins, and I know they go to work every day with the intention to do the best job they can and to provide the best service that they can. So with that, we're taking that spirit along with the spirit of being true to our community and having true conversations with us into this process. And as we look at the African American race right now as a race of people that are challenged, that are in pain, that we see as the marginalized in the state of Georgia, the reason we decided to take on this project, I'm sharply reminded of the events that happened last night, and it's kind of hard for me even to focus to know that 9 people lost their lives senselessly in Charleston, South Carolina. So many of us have been affected. I have friends, the family members that were in that church that are now gone. Those are the opportunities that we have a chance to work on here in Georgia. And we are just so fortunate at Georgia Appleseed that the pro bono community here has truly answered our calls. Thus far, we've had over 200 lawyers total that have signed up and done pro bono work for us. Nelson Mullins gave us 40 attorneys that has researched every aspect of Georgia law, from prosecutorial charges to usage of cameras to policies and procedures, things of that nature. That's how we have embraced our pro bono partners. We have lawyers that have signed up to conduct stakeholder interviews for people from all over this state, from every geographical area, from every race, every profession, every background. Again, lawyers get involved to do great work. I can go on and on about the things that lawyers all across the state have done to be a great benefit to the people and the additional assistance that we need as well, especially with Southwest Georgia that we talked about so much today. And as someone who works on the ground now quite a bit, I can tell you that the need is real. The need is painful. And it's something that's immediately visible if you venture outside of Atlanta. So with that, I'll acknowledge that we are under a time constraint and pause here to let our others address the time.
Thanks, Tim. My name is Marty Ellen. I'm the director of the Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation. Most of our work is in Fulton County. Most of our work is where the lawyers are and where there are a lot of lawyer resources. We were formed to recruit private lawyers to do pro bono legal work. We spend our time looking into our community of clients and figuring out what are the unmet civil legal needs, and we developed these programs in response. First, we have a housing program. Last year in Fulton County, there were 51,000 dispossessed sworn in the county alone, so we have a separate eviction defense program. We handle most of our housing and consumer matters through a Saturday program, 44 Saturdays a year. We have as many as 8 lawyers who come down and meet with 16 clients and speak about either housing matters or debt defense or wage claims. We run the county's domestic violence clinic. We have a courthouse-based walk-in clinic that handles about 2,000 visitors a year. We do that in partnership with a group called Partnership Against Domestic Violence. And the courthouse, which is crammed, has nonetheless given us a courtroom and chambers and sheriff and support to support that effort. We run the county's guardian ad litem program. We train virtually all the guardians ad litem. And we only provide them in cases where the parties can't afford to pay for their own guardian, but we do most of the training, and the court calls us to supply guardians when necessary. We have a probate information center program every other Monday for 4 hours. There are lawyers in the courthouse to answer questions of people who come to the probate court because, of course, the clerks can't answer, and the judge and we sign off on the lawyers who are there. They have to be members of the estate planning and probate section of the Atlanta Bar and have at least 3 years' experience. We also have had the happy circumstance of having our lawyers win cases on behalf of the clients, but then they bring the files back and they say, oh, I don't know anything about collection work. So went to the State Bar Creditors' Rights section and asked, will you help us? And that section now does the collection work for the cases, for the claims that we collect. When creditors wrongfully hide in the bankruptcy court, the Atlanta Bar Association's bankruptcy section will now move through a low-income creditor assistance project, go into the bankruptcy court and take on the adversary proceedings. We do a lot of community education-related work. We have a lawyer in the library series, where we go to Atlanta public libraries and speak on the issues that the librarians ask us to speak to. Most of it is housing. We hired Doug's group to talk about expungement issues. When we go, we have access to resources. We're aware that we are in a rich talent area. And so virtually every one of the programs that we develop has a manual, has forms, has everything which we share with anyone who asks. We post them online or with response when people call and say, how do I go about setting up a probate information center? What are the answer is, let me show you, let us do this. And we will always send our lawyers to give a kickstart to programs anywhere in the state that need them. We will teach different judicial circuits about the guardian ad litem program or anything else that we can manage. We, of course, then, but realistically, we suffer like everybody else. We're way short on cash, and we have too few volunteers. The truth is, in the last couple of years, following the economic downturn, law firms have changed the way they do their business. The private law firms, even the big ones in Atlanta, have tended not to have the big classes of summer associates, not to have the big classes of new associates coming in, particularly thin in the litigation ranks, which is our bread and butter. So some of the big law firms have 4 or 5 litigation associates who are completely crazy, overwhelmed, and we can't tap their efforts in the way we used to. So we're in the business of recruiting again and all the time. The transactional groups are surging. Some of the other places where the law firms tend to be making more money now are surging. Litigation actually is suffering a little bit. But we're at it all the time, and I look forward to answering any questions you might have about our work or how we can help you. Mr. Amar, been slandered earlier today.
Well, according to the sign, I'm the king. That's all right. That's okay. I'm Doug Amar. I run the Georgia Justice Project. It's a 30-year-old organization that's totally privately funded. We do 3 things at the Georgia Justice Project. First, we do a holistic criminal defense representation. We represent our folks. We have social workers. We follow our folks in prison. It's not only when the case is over for us. We help our folks after prison to get back on their feet, work with our clients' families. So a holistic sort of deal. The second thing we do is around criminal records. We represented last year, this is about 500 people around the state, overcome the impact of a record. Expungement is the word that everybody uses, but the laws actually changed a little bit. But the point is that that's what we do. People often run the record of housing and jobs, trying to get back on their feet in any way, and even education is an area. The third thing we do is to help change the law in Georgia and work in a coalition, both in the state, a little bit of the region, but around Georgia. We do a lot of education work around the state. We work with folks in Albany, the Albany Second Chance Coalition, all over the state, Columbus. We work with the Columbus efforts. So the point is to help change the laws in Georgia. So on that point, we've rewritten the law in Georgia on expungement. We got the governor who wrote the new executive order around banning the box for Georgia. We've seen that. We also wrote the ban the box issue for the Fulton County Commission on that issue. The number of issues that affect, if you have a record, it becomes a problem, and we're working on lots of fronts with the Criminal Justice Reform Council, the legislature, the governor's office of reentry, as well as local jurisdictions to help move that needle. That's what we do. So, questions?
Are there questions about what any of the organizations does about Spanish or other translation services, or questions about how we can help you find good opportunities in your community?
While I have you there, I'm going to take the point of privilege here.
Other than Mike?
Janet just mentioned a pro bono LEP program where we gather interpreters together, train interpreters for volunteer lawyers. What's your sense of how that might work in your programs, if that's, you think that's a near-term or a long-term possibility for what you do? Let's put a condition on that.
I think it's good to know about. I mean, we've run into interpretation issues, I think it's good to know about. I don't think I've known much about it, so that's good. And we've run into issues more and more from all kind of, like the Atlanta area where most of our clients come from, obviously from the criminal side, the criminal record side. We could use it.
Good answer. Good answer.
That's right.
Of course.
We would certainly welcome those volunteers because, as nonprofit organizations, we often do work and we do it in our best interest and best effort to be of total representation of the state. But oftentimes we leave people out of that assessment and population because we, A, can't communicate with them, or 2, can't reach them talking about the access to justice, and their voices get left out. So a lot of organizations can do a lot better and have more diverse methods of reaching out to the constituency to make sure that we're capturing everyone's voice and truly representing what society needs and what we want. So, the utmost respect and for your ability and your talent is truly a skill. But one more important than what we just saw on display with the NBA Finals. To be honest with you, to give it the magnitude that it deserves. And until we embrace that, we're going to continue to find a population of people that are not representing, their voices are not heard.
And just to draw on something that Mike stated, just to, I think, make it plain and make it clear, as my grandma used to say, we want to know that there is a significant number or proportion of low-income people that qualify for indigent civil legal services, but who are also limited English proficient or deaf and hard of hearing. And I think Mike really touched on something when he posed a question, which he said, trying to get a pool of trained, qualified interpreters. Oftentimes, there are a lot of issues with courts sometimes using individuals who are not qualified, and in addition to the risk of possible reversible error on appeal, just the possible substantive due process issues that you may run into because that person is not aware and doesn't have the adequate technical skill to, one, be able to interpret legal terms of art. They are unaware that they should not be paraphrasing, summarizing, or omitting anything that's being said. And a lot of times, unbeknownst to the court, when people are unqualified to interpret, they may sometimes coach or counsel the LEP or deaf and hard of hearing person on what to say or not say, when they should strictly be a communication medium. So it's really important not that we just have more interpreters, that we have more qualified interpreters who can provide that service and help our judges and our other language access stakeholders do their jobs in helping us make sure that everyone has access to justice.
We have corporate legal divisions in Atlanta that are working in that direction. Home Depot, for instance, went and pitched to their lawyers, but they had the entire legal department there, and there were a lot of the people who worked who were not lawyers, the paralegals, the secretaries, and others, who said, I want to help and I speak. And there were about 11 languages represented. We ran up against, so it helps us a great deal with our clients. When we go to court, obviously it's a different issue, but we've been talking about how we can embellish the process of getting people certified.
Teddy, I wanted to find out kind of where you all were in the process with the race law enforcement and the law project, where you all in that process.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question and for your interest. I am thoroughly pleased with where we are right now with this project and the progress that we're making, considering that we really launched it around mid-March. I mentioned Nelson Mullins earlier, but you know, you have Austin Bird, Huntington Williams, Kilpatrick Townsend, Keeney Spalding, all the major law firms in Atlanta chipped in some manner and provided pro bono attorneys to help this project. We've done all the research that needs to be done. We have volumes of memos that we're combing through, pulling out relevant information in those memos. At this point, we are conducting stakeholder interviews all over the state of Georgia. We've identified over 500 people that we want to interview, and we've trained over 200 attorneys to help us conduct those interviews that are going to do it on their own time. Once that is done, once we feel we have sufficient feedback from the community, we will compile a report in which we're going to work with the partners that we've compiled to issue that report over Georgia with best practices on how not only law enforcement, we can have better community relationships, but recommendations for our communities, how we can help ourselves as well. We've had conversations with people like Frank Rotondo, who is the Executive Director of the Chief of Police for Georgia. He's very supportive. Chief Lumpkin out of Savannah. We've talked to numerous judges and other community leaders and civic leaders that are extremely supportive of this project. And people are pleased with the way that we're bringing it forward, with the fact that we want to do the research and the due diligence of getting the voice of Georgia before we come out saying this is what needs to be done, coming at it from a biased perspective. So we're very proud of it. As you can imagine, this is a very sensitive subject. We've moved very carefully. We don't want to offend anyone. We want everyone to be at the table as we address this project and this issue in Georgia.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Are you done?
We will go on.
Well, no, we're over time now. I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank all of our participants very much. And these people are available to you. They have very good websites. They respond not just to me, but to you, because I haven't had anything but to write a check. Which is important. We did assemble for you these really good materials, and I do commend them for your reading because it's got a lot of stuff in here. And each one of you becomes an ambassador. If you'd like to tell your story, Mike over here will be over at the pro bono booth, and he will allow you to do that. So take 10 minutes, tell your story. I know we have some judges who want us to visit their jurisdictions and to have some lawyers tell their stories. Mike can recruit some folks who are good storytellers. If you want tears, if you want Jesus, if you want Buddha, or whomever's big in your area, we can find somebody to tell that story. I want to thank, of course, my boss, Chief Justice Thompson, and the Commission on Professionalism, my staff, Terry and Aneke, Steve Harper and Doug in the back, and of course, all of the Georgia lawyers who do this every day, particularly those who work for the legal aid agencies and our other pro bono agencies, because you all are doing the Lord's work. I think we know that today. So thank you all again, and enjoy the rest of this wonderful meeting. Thank you.